if you got to text and call someone multiple times a day, every day, then clearly they don't want to vote. If you got to call somebody multiple times a day, every day, to get them to get up and go vote, then clearly they don't see the importance of voting. If you got to text somebody multiple times a day, every day, then clearly they don't see the importance of voting, which makes me question a lot. I mean, if the people were so galvanized about voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, then why do you need to keep sending multiple text messages and multiple phone calls to get someone to vote? What are you trying to get them to do if they know the importance? Because clearly Joe Biden got the most votes for any president in U.S. history. So I'm trying to understand how folks would do that, but then not understand the importance of voting in a local election.
We have to touch black voters a minimum of 9 times to remind them to go vote. A minimum.
Exactly.
So that's why everybody's inundated with text messages and phone calls.
But that's a whole nother topic. I'll go to vote and the people tell me I already voted. Matter of fact, I go to vote, I put my card in the machine and it says I already voted. I go to another machine and it said I already voted. Then I go back to them and they can't figure out how I already voted, because clearly I haven't voted. And last time I tried to vote, I couldn't because the people said they weren't doing it at that site yet. So I go look at my voter registration card from 2004 and I noticed that it says black, non-Hispanic. And I said, oh, it makes sense. I mean, we're talking about multiple calls a day. We're talking about multiple texts a day. We're talking about flyers on my door. We're talking about stuff in my mailbox. We're talking about folks walking around ringing my doorbell. I mean, all this stuff going on to tell people how important it is to vote. But the people just turned out in record numbers. So how would they forget the importance of voting that fast? Something is not adding up. You know, when people are too desperate, you got to start questioning what's going on.
We have to touch black voters a minimum of 9 times to remind them to go vote. A minimum.
Exactly.
So that's why everybody's inundated with text messages and phone calls. And
when people are too desperate and too thirsty, you got to start questioning what's going on. Like, why do you all want me to vote so bad? With everything going on, it just seems coincidental that you all want me to vote this bad during this time, during the Peter pandemic, during the Great Reset. I mean, you all are thirsty and desperate to get people to vote. But I have to go back to my voter registration, and it said that I was black, non-Hispanic. And I said, man, it makes sense. It makes sense. Most Americans don't vote, and most black people don't vote. So you almost got to drag us out the bed to vote, or you got to use a whole bunch of propaganda to get us to vote. But I'm just tripping off the fact that when I go to vote, they say I already voted.
We have to touch black voters a minimum of 9 times to remind them to go vote. A minimum.
Exactly.
So that's why everybody's inundated with text messages and phone calls.
But I went to go vote, and the machine said I already voted. And I'm going to go back to my voter registration in 2004 when it was done, and it said black, non-Hispanic. Now, many of you all will say I'm a conspiracy theorist. Many of you all will say all these things, but I literally went in there and the machine said I voted. Why are these people so thirsty and desperate for us to vote? Why are these people so thirsty and desperate for us to get those 2 shots? You got to ask yourself these questions, because when people start acting in desperation, that means their character is compromised. God does not exist in desperation. So when a person starts getting desperate, that means their character is compromised or is about to be compromised.
We have to touch black voters a minimum of 9 times to remind them to go vote. A minimum.
Exactly.
So that's why everybody's inundated with text messages and phone calls.
Now ask yourself, if I didn't vote and you're going by my information, you're using my ID, how could the machine say I voted? If I didn't vote, if I didn't mail anything in, how could the machine say I voted? Clearly, something is wrong with the system if I didn't vote and I go in there and it said I voted.
We have to touch black voters a minimum of 9 times to remind them to go vote. A minimum.
Exactly.
So that's why everybody's inundated with text messages and phone calls. And
You all have told black people how important it is to vote, and you still got to do all these tactics? You still got to do all this? And we know the importance of voting? Clearly, we don't want to vote. How many black people do you think went to go vote and they already told them they voted and they just walked out? Like, how many times has that happened? How many times do you think a black person has gone to vote and they said they already voted? Since the machine said I voted and I was classified as black, non-Hispanic, who do you think the machine had me vote for? Wait for Free Blast, get money.